John Toro Black Closet Media. So I just kind of wanted to make a video, and I kind of want to put something out there. Um, we've been going kind of, I guess we'll say hard on whether we're talking about, because I got articles and I just got a bunch of expressive stuff out there. And I reached a point where I found this is like a storyline or some sort. And I think a lot of us, we can break down our lives into stories, our existence into stories. And I kind of just see myself as sort of, just kind of an adventurer, just kind of going all these different territories. And whether we're talking about the adult industry or whether we're talking about different things, I try to put out just kind of a huge mess of, I guess, myself and the things I want to express, at least through this sort of medium. So there's that. But I reached a point mentally where I kind of get to this kind of comfortable place. It's kind of comfort. It's kind of a minority solace, what I call it. And you break it down, and we all have a kind of imaginative scope. We have a play. We have a kind of company, and we keep in mind of our space. And I've said this, if I'm Peter Pan, then this is basically just my campus. And I've reached a place where I'm kind of comfortable. Kind of found this baseline. And I think in a lot of ways it means that I kind of put everything I wanted to put out there. Anything that happens after this point is basically just new. It's going to be new for me, and it's a question of what that means. I've said this before about how I like kind of breaking things down, and like sequels and that kind of stuff. And part of me is like, why am I even using canonical language? Practicing, at least aspects of me putting things out there. And well, for me personally, I try not to use as much canonical language, and kind of make things more significant in terms of its maybe a meaning to myself or whatever the hell I'm trying to do. It's not that I found myself in the loss. I haven't. It's not that. It's I generally put everything I want out there. Like if there was like a core volume of things that you wanted to put out there, you know what I mean? And you break all that stuff down, and you finally get to a baseline where you're comfortable. It's like, okay, I put all the things I wanted to put out there. And it's not even like they were like necessarily planned. There's stuff that in the back of my mind I wanted to talk about, and I think I have. I'm pretty content. And I think that's a very important thing. One of the things that's kind of interesting about, especially when we're talking about the U.S., specifically, especially like large, big city territories, and I think everywhere, specifically in America, we talk about there's always something to get. There's always some kind of accolade that people want to achieve. I guess you want to say that. Use that word, achieve. And those accolades for some is it starts off very colorful. You have to put something in it because it starts off with there's an expectation, there's an idea of all of us kind of trying to get to this thing, whatever that thing is, and it's whether it's capital, whether that thing is an abundance of. You want to get as much resources in something, and yeah, there might be some of that that's hidden in our genes. But those things are largely created. They're all, a lot of the fundamentals of that stuff is stuff that we definitely create for ourselves, for our societies. And there's something against being content. And I've talked about this, of course. And I think contentment can be a really great thing. In a lot of ways, this video is kind of a response to myself being content. and how to attack the things. Man, you know what? It's fun. There's so many things that I've mentally, not even like physically, but just like getting to a point mentally I've put myself into. And there's all these changes around you, and I think a lot of it is like, you know, how much of yourself are you going to change? Like, are you going to? I think the weird thing is I get worried about the changes around me, and I think I learned to do that. And I don't think it was. I don't know if it was like the military. I don't know, but you get kind of freaked out when things around you change, and it's like, are you trying to keep things the way they are? You know, you get used to a certain way of going about things, and when those things around you change, you're like, man, am I going to adjust to the things that have changed, or do I keep the course? There's something about keeping to a course. It's not even that, because what I'm doing is all about change. In itself is about change. In itself is about moving things along. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to keep yourself from doing that just because there are changes around you. You want to make sure that you don't want to stop yourself. In a lot of ways, this journey is about breaking out of a particular shell. Socially, I kind of have a shell. Whether it's around family, whether it's around associates, I have a bit of a shell from them. They're all part of that common clay. All of us, as an individual, you have the outside of yourself, and that's a common clay. And there's a measure of how much you kind of conform to that. There might even be a belief. There's a lot of kind of places in the world, families within those places that, there's not a lot of individuality. And the interesting is, it starts with you being an individual. I know you're a social creature in nature, but there's a measure of how much you really want to give away. Being introduced to a slice of society, there's a lot of ideologies. I mean, every culture is a cult, and it's all about how much of yourself are you sacrificing or will sacrifice. I don't want to change. I don't want to change in a way where I'm not comfortable with myself. I don't want to go back to the shell, is what I'm saying. I don't want to go back in there. I don't want to be huddled up. I want to enjoy things for myself. I don't really want to go back into my shell. I really don't. I like going outside of my shell in this way. I don't want to go back. I don't want to adjust but like the adjustment also requires me going back. I want to go, your external, is that right? Externally. Your interaction with that, a lot of that is incidental, right? So it's all about kind of breaking out. And keeping that theme into the adult industry, a lot of that is finding their minority solace, finding their comfortable baseline. To me, it's always kind of been like a circus, and that it's a small community that's very specific, in that they themselves. I think the significance of a circus is how much they're seen as an other from the rest of society, and that's something that they have with each other, that they're all considered an other outside of their community, and that, in a lot of ways, the adult industry is very much that. There's a lot of people go to the circus. A lot of people use pornography. A lot of people use the sex industry for their own uses, for their own entertainment. And it's a question of, like, when they walk away from that circus, when they walk away from the adult industry. And I mentioned the black closet. Something that you put in, it's going to be open. And what are you building up for yourself? Like, when you leave that circus, what are you thinking about those people that entertain you? Are they just freaks? Are they talented folks? I suppose it's a matter of how that specific cult or culture um, what they tell each other, tell themselves, and what they tell themselves is that, where's that coming from? Their individuality, it's is it something that they kind of get from the community? Is it a mix of both? And I think we all have that with ourselves. There's a question of how much we're sacrificing for the common clay, for our society around us, how much we're taking away for ourselves. And there's a bit of there's almost this weird guilt you get when you get out of your community. And I'm not really sure what this guilt is. I wonder if it's like a template, like a mental template you have, because you keep those close in your mind, and you have an emotional attachment to the folks around you, aspects of your condition in relations to that relationship you have with them, and in a way they kind of leave scars, and those scars can bother you. They can be big, For instance, a lot of people who are in the adult industry, they have a lot of family members that have relations to religion. And of course, religion, in the way that's at least mostly spoke of, is very much enshrined. It's very much connected. What am I trying to say? Very much connected into like big ideas about life and meaning, and there's a lot of morality and ideas, at least the ones we talk about. I mean, religion in itself is kind of broad, but specifically the ones where, I'm talking about churches and stuff where God comes involved, kind of stuff. Big, heavy stuff. And it's not even like, it doesn't always happen to be about what you personally believe. It's, it's interesting. People find their comfort zone in different ways. Like, you're minority solace, which is, in a way, your internal solidarity comes from your own individuality, but comes from your society. It depends, I guess. I mean, I think ultimately it's going to come from both, in a way. And I don't mean like, you get your license from them and yourself. Mostly it's like you're a social creature, so incidentally a lot of that stuff is going to come in. It's going to come into account. And there's a kind of an adjustment you have to bring to yourself. And I'm trying to think like I have ideas I would like to do. I wonder, is it like, are these ideas in response to the changes? They would have to be, in a way. Not in a way, almost like I'm going to ignore those changes, or I'm going to keep steady on as those changes are taking place. I definitely don't want to change any of the things I've done. I will use the phrase gone too far to just leave it all behind. I don't know. Of course, I put out different content depending on where you're looking. So, man. Apologies, I'm just kind of taking it in. Once you find your comfortable baseline, and that combination of yourself and your environment. I guess it's a question of keeping that place. Um, in some ways, man, it can feel like you against the world. So many templates out there by society. And you break down those templates, and whether we're talking about the adult industry or whether we're talking about your own personal life, it all kind of connects in that we're all kind of doing the same thing. I mean, a lot of people are comfortable with their societies and their place in it, and the things they say, and the things that they kind of gather from their society, the way they go about things. Others, they kind of find their own treasures. Have you ever noticed, like, when you find your, whatever that comfort is, that everything becomes, I guess it depends on the person, like, if you're specifically someone that tends to have a curiosity, and you tend to want to, like, you have a gravitation toward different ideas. There may not even be different, just like different than whatever your baseline is, even if you've gone through those things before, you know. It's like once you've kind of gone through the case, it becomes like a box of boxes of all these ghosts. You open this almost like it's like brand new, because you're coming in with different perspective. You know, I guess my nerves. I you know, once I leave an idea, like and so you understand what I mean. Like, whether, you know, I'm sitting there talking about not using as much canonical language. Kind of not being so, not caring so much about approval or appeal, basically doing things kind of unadulterated, just kind of going at things, not really thinking about society, you know, kind of being kind of amoral, at least in perspective. And if you do things like that, you start noticing just how, one of the things I notice about society, as I move away from these things, you know, like, you know, time being in itself as an idea, it being kind of a construct, a peril tally that we kind of use, and there's so many philosophies attached to this concept that we know that we kind of can just ignore. It's not, there's so much about it that's not real in nature. It's not even accurate. It works. It's in that it's very useful. It's so useful, and people are so attached to this idea. Every other song's, but you always hear about this word: time this, time that, time that. It's everywhere. It's almost ridiculous, because like, you know, like in the end of the space, we'll use something different. And we all live on this set foundation in which the things that are on the set foundation, they interact with itself, with each other, the environment interact with it, vice versa. It's and we have this mathematical differential with a label. Very practical stuff, but it is constructed. But people believe in it as if it's so, I don't know, people get so frightened of it. You know, so many people get frightened of these magical numbers that people throw out there. It's because it's not even that relevant that it's true. You know what I mean? Like, it's people almost distract themselves by these things. Like, people say things like life is short. It's not short. It's not long. It's not. No one told you, except your society. Outside your society, no one told you to keep track of that kind of stuff. You know, no other creature around you does that or need to. And people get wrapped up in this idea. This is what I mean about, like, when you step away from that stuff, you start realizing how much as a social creature we get wrapped up in these ideas, and how much liberating it is when you step out of that stuff. But because that stuff is so strong with society, you kind of wonder, like, am I right? Am I wrong? you look things up and you're like, no, I was right. You're like, I was thinking, I really I took a lot of space with this. I really interacted with this thing. And you're not wrong, because it's not wrong. Like, you're using things that aren't like, these aren't hot topics. These are things you can find naturally. They're not difficult to understand. This is a question of, the question isn't I'm correct and you're wrong. The question is, I don't have to care about the things that they care about. I can stand on my own ground here, and I have a lot of reason to. It's liberating to do that. But I don't know. I've come to accept that people don't really want self-liberation. We're still creatures of convenience. We don't, humans, most creatures I don't think really want self-liberation. They want comfort. You might have an idea about being, having comfort in your liberation. And so that might be a source, but it's all about finding your comfort. It's all about finding that convenience for you. This is why there's a lot of crossing. Like, as I was going into this stuff with learning about using the sex industry, for example, and people's guilt about sex, and people's feelings about sex, and specifically, I started realizing there's a lot of crossing in terms of ideas. Like, you know, so many people who think they have a porn addiction, they just have a predictable avenue to the sex, because sex is automotive. It's something you have in you. It's a natural function there. And they're confusing two different things. So they already have a sex drive. They have a convenient way to view and to get their rocks off. But because of that, in crossing with their religious background or whatever guilt they have, they tend to, those things merge, and they tend to feel like they have an addiction to something. Even it would be equivalent if you're hungry and you have a refrigerator full of food. You know, you're not addicted to the refrigerator. You like food. It's just that you're closer to the refrigerator than you are driving somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, it's, and of course you have to take into account that the refrigerator is full of all the things you like, right? The refrigerator in this case would be, there's nothing you couldn't find in the refrigerator. It's all there. Why are you going to McDonald's? It's all in the refrigerator. Why are you going to get spaghetti? It's in the refrigerator already. You know, it's convenience right there. And people get that confused with addiction, but I think it's a lot to do with, it's not it's the guilt they feel about sexuality. No one told you, like, nature didn't tell you to have this. It's almost like, you ever heard that this is where the big thing with black closet comes from. You know, like when you orgasm, right? And you have that clarity. And whatever that clarity is, some people, they feel like, because when you're sexually aroused, it's supposed to impair your sensibilities a bit. That's why you're more likely to venture into things that you would consider extreme. They're just kind of different. You might be habituated, which is why you're going to things that are extreme, but they're not extreme. They're just different from what you're used to. But you're impaired when you're in that sexual groove. So when you orgasm, afterwards, that guilt is probably something that you had before you started getting aroused, right? This is what I'm talking about with the black closet. It's like, what are you putting in there? What are you setting yourself up for when you're done? And the guilt is not natural, really. You're not supposed to have like a natural guilt when you're after your orgasm. It's quite curious that people have that. But it's interesting. But that's their comfort. And when you have your comfortable baseline, like within your church, within your community, but then you still have sex, right? You still have to deal with that, right? How do I keep myself modest as I'm interacting with sex, but I have this whole religious stuff, which might be specifically conservative to your sexual sensibilities, at least naturally. I mean, at least when you're aroused, In some way, it's hilarious. There's something hilarious about people's aversion to their own sexuality. And I know we're supposed to respect whose religion and all, but I don't know. Um, I, hmm, I don't know. It's just a belief, you know what I mean? Like, people believe in a bunch of bullshit. They believe when they want to believe, right? I mean, you believe what you want to believe. If life is objectively meaningless, you can believe really anything, honestly. The fact that we're social creatures kind of make it, I don't know. Humans are, this animal is interesting. Um, Also, as humans don't like to think of themselves as animals, which is also interesting. Even if we weren't, I don't know why that makes us any more significant. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you ever the argument of meaning in itself? Like, when you're like, well, life is, life has meaning, right? Even if it does, I don't know what that, like, you know what I mean? Like, if you get to the natural conclusion, like, go past that point. Okay, let's say there's meaning. So what? Like, what does that mean? Like, why is that important in itself? So what? Um, I don't even know what that looks like. Well, like, what does that mean if there's meaning? Like, what does that mean? Does that change really that much? Like, I don't know. It doesn't seem to. I don't know. It doesn't seem to mean much, even if there was. You know. The same thing with a lot of different things. You reach the natural conclusion. You're kind of like, well, I don't know. I don't know if your kind of social template, that thing you cultivate around that religion or that belief, it really means much in the end. You know, and when I mean the end, I mean of reaching that conclusion of your existence or anyone's existence. I don't know why that becomes that much of a factor. I get it, but it's also kind of hilarious. It could be hilarious, but damn it. And that's the thing. This is not a hot topic. These are natural conclusions to a person that you can come to. These are natural conclusions. These are things that you find in the observable plane. Like people don't extend this stuff to other animals like ants and bacteria, whether we're talking about single cell or multi cell organisms, we don't extend this stuff to them. But what you expect for yourself is what you expect from them. This is the thing about the whole animal thing. Humans don't like to think of themselves as animals. At least a lot of them don't. But like, even if you weren't, does that make you less like? I don't know what that means. So what? So you're not an animal. What? Okay. So does that make you more significant somehow? I don't think so. Like, you can call yourself where you want to call you. I don't know. You're still going to decay. I don't really know what that means. Like, okay. And even if you don't, okay, let's go ahead. Let's say that we don't decay, and we go into a different plane. Still, I don't know what. Like, you keep following this tunnel, and it's like sure, but I don't know what that means. Like in itself, well, why is that so important? I don't know. If there's information, I mean, I guess if you feel like you're gonna go to this like hell place or something, which is it's interesting. Very animalistic. It almost makes you seem more animalistic, the way that you kind of think, you know? In some way, because it's all very primal and very self-preservation. It's all feeding off of your natural tendencies like any other animal, right? Why do you fear hell? Because you're self-preservation. You know, you don't like pain, right? You don't want to go to a place that's like physically painful, right? That's what you're thinking about. You're using your natural, your natural bodily sensitivity, or your mental sensitivity. What makes up your minority solace is just the things you have in yourself and your nature, right? You have a brain which is capable of imagination, building a scope. You have your play, your physical way of going about things, your company, which is you being a social creature, and your space. Your ability to kind of, you have space. Everything is space. We're in space right now. There is the idea of you being in space, and then there's the fact that you are in space. One of them is true in nature, and the other one is more of an idea, right? Like, well, let's go to space. Well, you are in space. We are literally in space. We're not in space. What do you think when you look outside? You're looking at space. We can literally see other planets from this spot. We are in space. We're never not in space. This is all space. And I don't mean space is in outer space. I mean like it's all the space between your fingers, the space between even the fingers are closed. There's still space in it. Space everywhere. All that thing, like I'm doing this, right? That's space. What you're feeling is space. Literally, all of it is space. All space. It's a conceit, also a reality. It's both. It's all there. Everything is space. If there's ever a meaning in life, it's probably just space, basically. Finding this comfort zone, your minority solace. It's always a minority. If your body, here's my logic with that, when I use the word minority. Because usually it's associated with a social group, like a small group, right? Something that small group has in common, a culture, if you will, something that they share. That's your body. Your body is nothing more than the community. Your one single body is a community of a lot of things, right? But it's a minority because you're one, right? It's a minority compared to others, right? Inherently, it's a minority. And I don't know, like you have, some of us have, well, okay, we'll break this. So we got people who are, because you might be blind, you might be deaf, but you do have something, right? In some way. Even Helen Keller had a minority solace, right? She had her imaginative scope. She had her play, right? She had her company. She had her space. And then whatever makes that up, right? Your play. What does that mean? You might you might be someone that likes listening to music, right? You use your feet to get to one place to the next. You use your bodily sensitivities, and your mental sensibilities, your social sensibilities. You have your company, the things that are related to those things, and the way that what's interconnected, right? Your nervous, literally your central nervous system is something that you use a lot. It is something that you find comfort in, or at least you should. How much you uphold in your own individuality depends, right? You might be someone that's maybe you're really, really. You have a lot of what's the word? Pride in your culture. Like maybe you're Native American. You have a lot of pride in that minority and those ideas, those things, the music, the people, right? The things, the conversation you have, right? You take comfort in that baseline. Now, what I'm trying to say is that you don't have to, you don't do anything, right? But you would be nice, much like what you find in the adult industry, right? You find yourself different from society. For an example, let's say you find yourself, this is where we get back to that circus, right? You find yourself different in your society, so you find another society, maybe. Or yourself, you might rely on yourself, depends on the people. I'm pretty asocial, so I don't know. That's what's so ironic and weird about this, because I'm pretty asocial. I don't really know. Maybe that's where all that guilt is coming from, because the difference is that interacting with me is social in nature. And another thing, I don't mean like I don't want to go so much about me using myself as an example too much, because like I don't know, as an individual human animal, I only know what I think I know. I can only suspect as far as my imagination can climb, and I don't know what limitation that brings me, right? There are things that I won't ever want to see, right? Easily, right? But there's a lot of things I'd like to venture into, right? I might have phobias. I don't really want to venture into those things. Or I might just have things that we can all relate to that we don't want to see, right? But we have those other avenues we go into. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because when it comes to people and me, I don't know. I only know what I know. I don't know. But I'll say this. You might be someone that you might find yourself different from your society, right? Maybe in your society we live in like a place. Like, hey, maybe it's like a really like a small cult, and everyone wears like specific clothes, and you decide to wear, a funny hat or something, right? And they may not understand why you wear. Like he's so different, she's so different, they're so different. Look at that hat. Look at their shoes. Look at the way they dress. Look at the way they talk. These things might be very insignificant, honestly, when you really think about it. But in that society, it might be considered kind of off, right? Maybe you venture off to a different place, or you find yourself on the internet. It's like, hey, there's people like me, or maybe they're not like you specifically, but maybe they're different, and so maybe they understand each other. Hell, literally, the circus is filled with people that are different from you. They're super different from each other, but the one thing for sure they have in common is that, at least compared to the common clay, they are some freaks, at least compared to them, right? That's what they're considered, freaks, right? It's literally the freak show. People take comfort in being freaks. Some people literally get their minority solace by being freaks, being considered freaks. You guys ever heard of Bridget the Midget? She takes comfort. She somehow finds her baseline in being considered a midget, right? Now that might be a technical term, right? Maybe in some way, or depending on how you use it. Honestly, I don't know. I'm assuming that there might be a technical term for me. I don't know. I know it's mostly used as an insult, or at least it seemed as derogatory, because like they're just humans, right? They're not. In a way, it's like they're so in that society that's like, look, I know that we all use this word for things. I get it, right? But a lot of people within that community, it depends. Like Bridget the Midget specifically, she embraces that term, and a lot of people, depends on where you are. And again, we will have to consider like different sensibilities depending on where we are. People at this point in this space, in this territory, we all want to do the right. It seems like the right thing is kind of in the surface right now. People want to be respectful to people's sensibilities, and people's sensibilities are a little bit more socially considerable. We'll say that. Highly socially considerable. That's how people's sensibilities are in this particular culture, this space, right at this point. Now that will change as people continue to interact with each other in our societies and all this stuff. Usually, right? The usual. But people do find comfort in the things that make them different, right? As far as they can tell. It might be innate in that we can be fickle. It might be innate that we at least could be fickle. It might be innate that it might mean fickle, at least in terms of whatever set is, right? Whatever our social set is within ourselves, that we kind of spur out, we can kind of make those changes accordingly depending on where we're kind of coming from, right? So there's that. Whatever we're trying to aim for, right? For example, you're trying to, join a new sport. Your body hasn't done 10 push-ups, okay? Military personnel, all right? You're going into the military. I cannot believe I've been going about this and I haven't even mentioned the military that much. Okay, that's a perfect example. You're going into the military. Totally different. That is like they have their own court, their own judicial system. They have their own people. They have their own standards and sets. That is, if you didn't think if you didn't associate culture with cult, the military is the definition of a cult, at least in that negative connotation of it. They have all of that. It's all there. It's not. You cannot look at the military and you're like, it's not. It's definitely what people, at least every culture is a cult. But like that, if you weren't sure, look at the military. They're basically that. And the reason I got to point that because they have their own set of systems and all that. Now, you're you, right? Maybe you haven't done 10 push-ups in your life, right? You join that system, they're changing the way that your body interacts with itself, with the environment. Literally, you're being conditioned to handle yourself, literally. That's why they want you to be able to do push-ups and sit-ups, right? To kind of understand yourself in a different way. You kind of know what you could do and what you can kind of get to, right? Where your baseline is, right? You're trying to find your baseline within the standard, right? Socially, the way you stand, the way you talk, all that stuff is going to be arranged. And you have to find that baseline within yourself, right? Have you ever like seen videos where people ask others like, "Why did you join the military?" They're like, "I don't know." You don't know. Now they may not know why they joined the military, but they have a baseline. And although there are a lot of different, now here's my point with that specifically, because they all arrive at some place where they're comfortable in some rations with the military and themselves. Now that question is kind of significant because it is kind of a big change. Well, considering how immense your changes are going to be. But I mean, Zach is still Zach. Kimberly's still Kimberly. They're still the same people. They're not. What I'm trying to say is that no matter how much of change they've gone through in the military, they're still themselves. Like when you hear them say like, "I don't know," or whatever, I still hear them. They're still themselves. They're still who they are. They had to break it all down. Like you have to decide what that is going to be to you, right? Is this a paycheck? Is this some kind of work or hobby, right? Whatever it is to you. Maybe you want to be a hero or whatever. I don't know. In your mind. But you find that comfortable baseline from whatever you're coming from, and then wherever you get from the military. You find kind of you reach a place, right? I'm not going to say somewhere in the middle because that's not necessarily true. You might completely some people are super into their military stuff. You know what I'm talking about. There are people really into whatever their occupation is, right? Who are like maybe a little too much into it, you know what I'm saying? But they find their comfort in that. And some people like to be in the middle. Some people are just faking it throughout the whole crowd. They don't even, nothing about them is really changed. It's just all physical, right? They do it to fit in, but that's all it is, right? They're just fake until you make it, right? Getting your body or something about you in line until maybe you find a comfort in it, right? That's all. Really, that's all it's about. Not really. But that's what's going to get you on board mentally, physically, is finding that comfort. So yeah, minority solace in itself is not like in itself considered like a positive or negative thing. It's literally just finding that comfortable baseline. And you'd be surprised. Like people are always shocked when they see like Nazis and the people of Jonestown, you know what I'm talking about? They're all the same makeup. They're all you. They're all you. This is why it's so important for me to not have a morality in that sort of way. Like to see people as bad. Like, some people are like, there really are bad people. No, there isn't. There's no bad people. There's no good people. They're just people. We're literally talking about if we're going to use that logic, right? If we got Martin Luther King on one end and we got like Jeffrey Dahmer on the other. They're literally the same species. They make up the same species. A Nazi isn't like a specialized human. You do not get this thing forged out of some dark forest. No, these are same humans like you. Just different sensibilities. Have you not picked up a history book? Like, come on, man. Have you ever not like realized how vast societies have been and that they're the same makeup as you? The realization of that, and it's real in nature. Like, I'm not using any sort of, this is not a hot topic. These are things you find in nature. This is why it's so important that I think humans should really just recognize you can believe that you're not an animal all you want. I don't know why that's so difficult for humans to understand, like that they're animals too. But even if they're not, like, but it's kind of important that you do, because I feel like you should look at other animals too. Like, look at your spiders, look at your ants, look how what they are around each other. there's a lot of similarities between you and a plant, right? If an alien or some kind of species came from, and they're capable of learning this kind of differential, they would realize that there's not too many differences between you and a plant. There's a lot of similarities. How you guys get energy and food. I mean, there's a lot of similarities. Hell, we all have the same kind of setup. Have you noticed that? Like between the plant and the human, literally, there's if you start, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna work. I'm thinking though, maybe it'll work. Never mind. I'm not gonna do it. What I was trying to do, I was like, well, we all have the same setup, right? We all have kind of like a thorax, kind of abdomen, kind of like a line, right? And then there's like things sticking out of it, right? And then they all have very similar reasons, right? Like we all have like on the top of the thing, thorax. I keep calling it that, but we have like this center thing, and then we have things on top of it. We have like a sensory top, and then we have like things sticking out of it, and then you have sensors on top of that, like a tree, or a human, or a dog, or pretty much any other species on this planet. Hell, even things are not even like the strangest looking ones. Even octopuses have a similar setup. They're all very similar in nature. They operate very similarly, even if they're like really different. Even if they're like pieces of mush. They're a sponge thing still has very similar ideas going on, right? A block of sensory, very much what we are. A stick of sensory, really. You know what I'm trying to say. We're very similar, right? Hell, sponges are similar to, whether we're talking about gymnosperms or angiosperms. Okay, I'm getting a little too like. There's some. Never mind. I'm going off, but I'm basically making the same point. They're very similar. And when you're finding your baseline, once you're doing that, if you're interacting with that, if you haven't already, or you're moving into a different baseline, right? Whether you're going into the adult industry or military, or you're moving in with your parents, I don't know. You're finding your baseline, right? And man, all right. I don't want to turn this into a lesson, but because ultimately, we're sticking to the whole amoral thing. We're sticking to, because I'm not going to tell you how to exist. But I will say that keep in mind of your surroundings, all of it. And I don't know. Because like, even with mental health, some people have mental health conditions where there are things that they can't help. And when they're finding their comfort zone, when they're finding their baseline, some people can't interact with too many people. That could be very straining on the brain, because they're constantly adapting to different kind of personalities. There are certain kind of bipolar differentials where like you go to one person to another, and you're kind of always meshing with. And it's not so much that you're doing that, because I think people do that to a certain extent. It's the mental exhaustion you get from doing it, because you're putting so much of your focus on this one entity, and you're kind of meshing with them. It almost feels like you don't even have your own personality, right? And then you go to this person, right? That's you're kind of interacting with both things. There might be something going on in your background, and you're putting some of your effort into that. And finding that baseline when you're having so much you're kind of balancing out can be really exhausting. So, this is more of an understanding. This is kind of a letting out. And as I continue to interact with this stuff, this technology, and putting my stuff out there, finding my own baseline, I want to be as conscious as I could, and I want to be happy that for the things I don't have to deal with, and the things that I do deal with. Hopefully, I can always find a comfort in it. I can always find myself in it. And so, John Toro, Black Lives Media, and thank you.